I see your mountain image
Yeah,
behind
that's
you.
Boulder. I live in Boulder.
Oh, nice. That's the city with a lot of interesting people in it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good word for it. There's a lot of mix of people here for sure.
Yeah, I like Boulder. I like Boulder a lot. A friend of mine, interestingly enough, oh, it's right on time, but very quickly, he's
Oh yeah.
an IT guy, and as a hobby and for fun, he works part-time for the police department on the SWAT team. So he's one of the IT guys in the van when the SWAT team goes out. So
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
kind of interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, really quickly, I'm curious, where are you located?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, well, let's see. We'll get started, I guess now. I sort of ran through all of this. Is the first time I'm giving this presentation, so let's hope for the best. I think it's going to be amazing. I hope, fingers crossed. So, okay. So you can see the GroupBy slide, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so welcome to GroupBy. So America's today, Europe time slots tomorrow, and there's a code of conduct that we all need to follow. So harassment free, no tolerance of harassment in any form. And there is a link here on this slide that if you need any more details, you can visit. I'd like to take a second here to thank the sponsors, because without the sponsors, then we have no conference. So show them some love, visit them, thank them. They're wonderful. So welcome to Auditing SQL Server, Extended Events versus SQL Server Audit. Sounds like some kind of competition. It really is, but it's not. They're both wonderful. And I am Josephine Bush. I am a senior database administrator, and I blog at SQL Kitty intermittently. And you can reach me at Hello SQL Kitty on Twitter. I have over 10 years of database administration experience. I have an MCSE, I have some degrees, and I sort of glaze over that kind of fast there, but they're listed there. And I am the author of Learn SQL Database Programming.
You do not get to have an MBA and go, I have some degrees.
I know. They're just like, they're there. I know. I just sort of, it sort of feels like overkill to list them. Yes, exactly. Some degrees, never mind. Yeah. So today I'm going to talk about auditing, why and how you can use auditing, how it can benefit you. And there are plenty of problems you can solve with it, make your life easier by knowing what's going on. And you can make your life even easier by centralizing your data and to just make it easier to query and report on it. And then at the end, I'm going to just touch on cloud auditing a little bit, because a lot of people are going to the cloud and there's differences. This is not going to be the same in the cloud, what I'm showing you here. Oh, you know what? I take it back. I'm not going to show you about this stuff. What was I thinking? Am I on the right slides? I'm sorry. Maybe I've already messed something up. Hold on. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to do something crazy here and say that I think I'm in the right presentation. My agenda is messed up. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go through all this stuff. Oh my gosh. I just practiced this earlier. Didn't I just say I didn't practice this? So what we're going to go through, just forget that you saw this bit, is we're going to go through what extended events is and what SQL Server Audit is. This is from my How to Audit SQL Server for Free presentation. That's also wonderful, but not this. So forget you saw that. So let's just talk about what is auditing. A lot of people cringe when they hear auditing, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people get this idea that it's bad because you think the IRS is going to audit you and it's going to be terrible because you're going to have to pay back taxes and penalties. So like here in America, that's how it works. If you get audited, that's usually what happens. Although I got audited one time and the woman's like, you sound very worried, but don't worry. We think we owe you money. So I was like, phew, okay, it's not so bad. But I think it's a really good thing. I get that people think it's scary with especially external auditors who come visit you and ask all these questions, but honestly, it's so nice to know what's going on. You can see if people are following procedures properly, or you can figure out procedures maybe based on what you're seeing people doing. And so it's so nice to know what's going on. And that's why you want to audit like I said, you know, you don't know what's going on. Maybe your company is required to audit, or maybe they don't think it's important to audit, or whatever reasons there are for doing it or not doing it. I think you should do it even if you're not required. I just got tired of people coming to me blaming the database on why something was broken. And that was a good thing ultimately that I did prioritize it, because we got acquired by a more heavily regulated company and they need auditing reports on a weekly basis now. So it was really good that I already had all this in place. So really, you're in the dark without auditing. It can help you figure out if something changed, and then maybe that's what broke it. And a lot of times people come to you saying, oh, it's the database fault. It's the database fault. You know, something broke in there, and it's, you know, but now you can say, well, nothing changed. Or you could say this thing changed in here. And then they go, oh, well, that wouldn't have broken this. And they usually run off in some other direction and leave you alone. And so another thing that happened where I work is that we had an SA password that got shared around purposefully. People didn't even realize the power they had with SA either. They were just using it for regular daily tasks like writing data to tables or reading it. It was simple stuff. So we had to get them out of that SA account, get them set up on their own account. And the thing is, they don't really know. A lot of them don't have time to look, or they're just like, I don't know how I'm using it. So it really helps to have that auditing to figure that out. So I always start kind of disclaimer too, because the thing with auditing is you have to be really careful. It's not necessarily likely that you would freeze up a production server, but it happened to me, and I'll tell you my horror story as we go through here. But it's, even if you don't do something to damage, like somehow to crash your server, which that was only because I was trying to stop an audit, by the way. The audit running itself wasn't causing the performance issue. It was trying to stop it, and it's busy auditing. And then it's like, nope, I'm not going to stop. So even still, even if you don't do that, then you could just have so much auditing data that you can't read through it all, and you might as well not even audit. So it just be careful. You're going to do the less is more method of auditing. So the first thing I'm going to cover is extended events, and I'm going to shorten that. People kind of refer to X events just so that it's less for me to say. And they're really lightweight and flexible, so you can audit what users do. You can also use this for monitoring, so like wait stats and other performance stuff. This can also do that. And when you're setting it up, it provides you with templates. So if you're not really sure how you're going to go about it, you could always use the template. It's like profile or trace is kind of like in that same vein, so we feel familiar to you. There are some default ones in there that you can always look at too. Those are like system stuff that SQL Server uses, so don't get rid of them or change them because they need to be there for that. But I just want to mention that those are there. And it was introduced in 2008, and then in 2012 they added a GUI to interface for it, so it made it a little bit easier for you to use. And like I said, these are the default ones that come with it. So you could go look at these and get a feel for how something could be set up for monitoring, like a more performance type stuff, the system health that SQL Server does. But like I said, don't change those or disable them or whatever. There's some always on is a lot of times disabled. Like if you're not using always on, that's disabled. But so that's something else that you might find sitting there, just so you know when you go in there to create something, one of these may be in this incarnation sitting there. So to create your own X event though, you can do this in the GUI, and you can either use a wizard or you can just do the new session. So the wizard is going to step you through more, whereas the new session is going to bring up a dialog box, and then you got to click around to figure out what you're doing. So I think it's better when you're new, if you haven't done it before, to step through the wizard, because it'll walk you through it all. It gives you an introduction, which I did not provide here because that's sort of overview, and then you are now into your session properties where you can name it, and then starting it as server startup, which I like to enable, because generally speaking, if the server restarts for patching or something else, then I want this to start again too. So basically you're naming it here, you're deciding whether you want to start at startup, and then here you're choosing a template or not, if you don't want to. But so I meant to provide you some template screenshot on the side. That's why there's a blank space there. But at any rate, I don't usually use the templates. So stuff in there is like things you would find in profile, for instance, like if you like there, you can see count query logs is one example, or there's activity tracking or connection logging and all kinds of things in there. So you can go and use those. But like I said, I'm not going to cover them because I'm going to show you something specific you can do for auditing what, say, for instance, a user is doing. So that's what I'm going to show you here. But those templates are there to help you in case you need them. So the next step we do, so we said we didn't choose a template. Nothing is going to be in here selected. Those events I selected there, RPC completed and SQL batch completed, are things I put there because those I feel like are the best choices for when, let's say I was going to audit SA, everything SA is going to do, I'm going to do those 2 events. And honestly, there's a ton of choices in this event library, so many things you could do in here. I'm not going to cover all that. There are links in a resources slide at the end, and that'll help you see all the different things you could do with X events, but I'm not going to go through that. So these are the ones that I tend to use when I'm auditing like a user or a database or something with X events that I want to capture. So I do those, I select these events, and then I go to the next step and I decide what fields do I want to see related to these events. So what do I want to see? I want to see these things I have listed here, like client app name, client host name, database name, server instance name, server principal name, SQL text. There are a bunch more in here. You can't see in the screen that there's like, well, you can see in the scroll bar, there's a lot more options you could get. These are just what I find most useful and what I think is helpful in me determining where something's coming from, who's calling this thing that I'm trying to figure out. And so this was the useful stuff for me out of this area. Then next, I need to set a filter. So well, you don't need to set a filter, but I like to because I generally speaking don't audit the entire server. Sometimes I do that if I'm trying to figure out if we're going to move an on-prem server to the cloud. Maybe I'm trying to figure out if all the stuff is even in use. Maybe I'll do that. But usually I filter some down a little bit and say, okay, I want to see, in this case, I'm doing SA. I did 2 different fields here, server principal name and username. It's not necessarily needed, but you could use one or the other of those. It's just to show you that you could add multiple filters to this, or you could exclude things. Like if you want to get everything on the server, but you don't want to see your service accounts and you don't want to see your monitoring account, all these other things, then you could filter those things out here. In this case, I'm filtering just for SA. Then in the next step, you're going to decide where do you want all this stuff to go. I save it to a file. I just find that's the easiest. And the thing is, choose a location if you're going to choose file, which would most likely be the best case scenario for collecting audit data, is put it on a file on disk, but don't set like tons of files, maximum files, tons of files, big, huge files. And I do 10 files, 10 megabytes. It's sort of just, I kind of randomly pick that just because if they get big, then they get really difficult to query. So 100 megabytes of files, if you get that much, it gets time consuming to query. Let's put it that way. Even still, if they get much bigger, I even had like 2 gigs of file at one time. It took a long time to query. So it's, yeah. So, and the other thing I recommend is you don't put it on the C drive and you don't put it on the data or log file drives or the system database drives, because they could grow if you accidentally forget to set this maximum size or it's big and then it fills up the drive. Well, you're in trouble. So we have an E drive where I work. It's very nice. It's application drive. So I just put it there. And then I did check the ring buffer target. I wouldn't use this at the same time as the file, and I wouldn't use this for auditing data, but this is an option for you if you wanted to put stuff in the ring buffer. It's just another option to X events. I personally wouldn't use it for auditing what's happening in this way, but X events can do that. So it's there for you. And the next step, it's just a summary of everything you've done. So it just give you a quick look, see if you configured something wrong. And then finally you get to the last step, success. It's been created. I always check the box to start it because nothing happens until you start it. So it's just sitting there disabled, then nothing's going to happen. So then you'll see this in your SSMS. It's listed there. extended events underneath the management area. And so now it's there mixed in with the other system X events for you. And what it does, since I chose file, which I recommend for this auditing stuff, is now it's put this file on disk, and it's gonna fill that up to 100 megabytes, and then it'll keep doing until 10 go in this case, because that's what I set. Whatever you feel comfortable setting, but just don't make them too big, too many of them, if you ask me. And then they start dropping off the back. So what I do with audit data is I wind up taking it out of the file and putting it either in a central database, depending what I audit, or if I'm just doing it for this one server, I want to see everything that SA does, I might just put it in a local auditing database. But needless to say, I don't just leave it in this file here forever, obviously, because it's not that many files. They're not that big. It won't store that much. So I wind up putting it in a database. So you can just watch the live data from this so that you can see the events that were captured kind of on the fly. I do this usually only if I want to see like quickly, oh, is something actually collecting? Because I know something ran, but then is something collecting? I might do this. I don't usually, because I like using queries. I like using scripts instead, but just know it's there for you. You can go and watch. It comes up in your browser. In your browser, not your browser, in your SQL Server Management Studio, and it's just listed there for you. So personally, I think I like setting up all this auditing with a script. I have to admit, when I first started, I did a lot of GUI work, and I would script it out from the GUI and then look at the script and see how it works. So I don't blame you if you go in and tinker in the GUI first and then script it out. But this is now how you create it. So you name it and you add these events, and you see the events and the actions, and they are together in the script now instead of on those separate pages in the wizard. And you can add your target here and set your startup state. So it's all really in alignment with the dialog box, right? And then you can alter it and set it on at the end, which I highly recommend. So it does something for you. So it's all in the script. I just think ultimately it's easier to do the script. Plus, if you want to add this to multiple servers, then, well, it's a lot easier. I don't have to click, and all that configuration in the GUI is a pain if you want to do this in multiple places. This is the script to query it. And the thing is, you have to parse XML. So that being said, at first the script is very confusing. And these are those actions I wanted, like the things from, the events from the action and so on. So this is what I wanted. So I have to pick that out of the XML to get it to show up in a table format though. And if you want something else, then you're going to have to figure out how to pick that out of the XML. And that can be tricky depending on where it is nested inside that XML. So the thing with the results is you might see a ton of stuff you didn't expect because SQL Server is doing all kinds of things in the background. You might see nothing. It's unlikely if you see nothing because it's most likely things are going on in the background. But if you filter it enough, like if I said just SA and then SA did nothing, then you might see nothing. So it just depends. If you see a lot or you see nothing, it's not like, ooh, panic, because it just may be that, what's happening on the server, what's not happening, right? Depending on the auditing. So there is a quick view X events underneath the agent down there. There's an X event profiler. So you want to just set up a quick one. Somebody said there's a problem with the server, something else is happening. It's less of an auditing thing and more of a sort of look-see, like, I don't know what's going on. Developers might come to you, something's going on, or somebody's having problems. So this is kind of nice to just launch something instead of having to configure something, then just make sure you stop it when you're done. So you can stop an X event through the GUI, right? You can right click and delete. We're deleting now, we're not stopping, we're actually deleting. So we delete it, we right click, and there's an option there, and then you can drop it with the script. So that's that. Stopping is simple as well. You could stop the session in the GUI, or you can use a script. This It's very nice, simple, very simple, because we're going to go through SQL Server auditing, and that's where the sticking points are. Stopping sessions, X events are easy to stop. They just stop. Whereas when we go through SQL Server Audit, you'll see the difference that stopping can be tricky if it's a busy server that you're auditing a ton of stuff on. So then you can modify X events through the GUI. If you click properties, it brings up a dialog box that's the standard, not the wizard, but the standard dialog box. Or you can do something like altering the event. If you know exactly what you want to accomplish, then you can alter the event with a script like this. You'll notice that if you alter an event and add actions to it, actually drops that event and re-adds that event in the actions. So if you are concerned about losing something, if you're auditing something and you want to change it, then there could be a brief period where it's dropping that event and adding back in that there could be like a gap in your auditing. So just to note that. The one thing you cannot change, though, I was going to note with changing things, is you can't change the name of it. You're going to have to drop it and recreate it. I don't think you can rename it. I've actually never tried, but through properties, I remember it being grayed out. So that's just one thing to note. So it's a good stopping point to just kind of review that they're lightweight and customizable. I personally think it's best for capturing, if you want to capture what a user is doing, or a database, or the whole server, maybe even. I mean, you might want to be careful of that because it's maybe a lot of auditing going on there. It's so lightweight. I don't think the issue will be that you're capturing so much that you cause a performance issue. It just might be that there's so much that you have to weed through trying to figure out what's happening. Of course, you can create it via the GUI or scripts, and we'll go through as we do SQL Server Audit. You'll see why that may be a better option for more nuanced auditing, whereas extended events for me is better for capturing, like I said, a whole, like a user. I don't want to see like a select that user does. I want to see everything that user does. Then extended events really shines there. So I'll pause for a second and see if there's any questions.
Yep, we do have a couple questions. One of them, and this came in when you were using the wizard for X event, about ring buffering. Is it just storing that in RAM?
You know, I don't know exactly how the ring buffer is stored, quite frankly. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to. I'm not that familiar with the ring buffer. I just know it stores only so many things in there, and then it's like flushed out. So I'm not sure how it's stored.
Okay. Fair enough. And then the other questions actually for me. So I'm curious, when you're setting this up to monitor what a particular user is doing, what are some of the reasons that you're doing that? I mean, is it you're just wanting to see where users are accessing the system, or what kind of changes they're making? What are some of the reasons that you would do that?
Right. So the main reasons I've used it is I need to audit a user people shouldn't be using anymore. So I need to see everything happening with that user, or I may need to see on smaller database servers with not a lot of high volume. I may run an extended event for seeing everything that's hitting it, because I might be I am migrating one SQL server to AWS RDS. So I want to see, is everything actually being used there? I don't want to move a bunch of stuff. Plus we have domain accounts that are domains that are not available in AWS because our company was acquired. We've got to move over to a different domain. So I've got to see like what all apps are using domains that I can't even migrate to RDS, for instance. Other things I've used it for is just like if I want to see if if anything's in use at all, really. I mean, some objects just aren't used at all. So that's just another use case that I want to get rid of some stuff on a database. Somebody's like, I don't think that database is in use. Let's get rid of it. Stuff like that.
Interesting. We did have one more question come in. Is X events functionality normally the same for Azure versus normal SQL Server? My testing is being difficult on Azure as I try to follow along here, and I'm not sure if it's the limitation of the service or just me doing something wrong.
So, like you're trying to use, I maybe start at the beginning of that question again. Is it that you're trying to use X events in?
I think they're trying to use SQL in Azure for it, versus normal SQL Server.
I think Yeah, personally, because I'm not doing the cloud review like my agenda said, oops. But I do have presentations that go through some of this, and not specifically X events on Azure SQL, but I have found it is much more difficult to do that work up there in Azure. So it may be a limitation of Azure more than a limitation of you, like what you're, if you're doing something wrong. I'm still researching that myself. Actually, I'm putting together another presentation that's going to start going through some more of the auditing options in Azure SQL, and that's going to be coming later, like in the next year. So unfortunately, I don't really have an answer because I haven't used extended events very much in Azure. So I think it might be limitations of Azure.
And Ash offered his thanks. He said it was good to know. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, no worries. Okay, let's see if I can do this without some other stuff. I can't believe it's my agenda that was the messed up thing. That's good. If it's just my agenda that's messed up, we're doing really good today. So I'm just gonna go through a quick demo. This script is not in my GitHub yet, but it will be when I'm done here. I will put it up there soon, probably today or tomorrow. And my GitHub is SQL Kitty. So this, I just put this at the top because if you're going to run through this, I just don't want you to just like hit a button, because what's going to happen is it will set up an X event and it'll drop it at the end. That wouldn't help you much. And then plus you may not want these settings on your prod server either. So I just want you to be careful. So what I was going to do is set it up in the GUI really quickly for you. So let me just show you really quickly the difference. So we have this wizard, which I showed you screenshots of right before. So maybe I won't do that this time. And then this new session. So this is the new session. So it's just, here it is, you know, let's call it audit. This is just, if you already knew how to use it, you could come in here and here's all your templates. I mentioned earlier that I didn't put on my slide accidentally. So here's a bunch of different stuff you could work from. If you just wanted something that could work, this activity tracking here might work for auditing. I don't personally use it because it just adds a bunch of other stuff I don't really want. So that's why I don't use a template. So then I say start it at server startup. I say start it immediately after. So this is not like the wizard I showed you, right? This is just the dialog box. So I just wanted to show you how it's different here. And then so that gives you basically on different pages in the wizards all together here. And then we go ahead into the events tab, and then we're going to say RPC completed. And so you can just type in here and get to, you know, the thing you actually want, whatever those are. This is what I do. And then, like I said, you can see now when I'm in here, there's all, I'm not expecting to read this. So this is like all these options, right? There's so many different options. But what I wind up with is those two. Now, because you're not in the wizard, you're going to have to go into each of these. So they see, okay, so here you go. So they say 0, because what's going to happen is you don't have any actions associated with these events. So that means it's not going to really capture anything. It's going to basically say, oh, something completed, but it's not going to tell you anything. So what you need to do is hit this configure button. And this is where you're going to decide to pick those actions that I mentioned to you, like client app name or client host name or whatever you think is important to you. So you're going to have to do that in here, because the wizard takes you nicely through all of this and applies it for you. But in this case, if you're going to not use the wizard, you have to go through and click all of this stuff on your own, right? So this would actually work. I'm not going to go through all of that here. I just wanted to show you how it would work in this here, without the wizard. I think it's way more confusing, actually. So, and you see how this sets, it just kind of says to you a maximum file size. Like when you set this, that's going to be way too much. I'm going to tell you right now that I personally think I've set a couple of gigs of file and it gets like impossible to parse through XML. So I would never set it like that, right? I was doing something smaller, like 10 and like 10, even that might be more than I need, because I start collecting every hour. So I'm not sure even I can get 100 meg of audit stuff going on. So I just kind of do it like that. And then, you know, you can go, there's other advanced settings. I never use any of this stuff. So I would say, okay, and it's going to set it here, right? So you can see now that it's enabled. It's got that green arrow, right? And it's set up there. And I didn't set everything up the way I would like it to be set up, because honestly, I can't stand using the GUI. But for comparison's sake, here is this wizard I showed you in the slides. It's a lot nicer when you're, this won't work. I won't actually say finish because it won't set up, because I already have one. But this is where you can, it just walks you through much easier. I actually think even knowing how to use the GUI and how to set everything up, I would probably use the wizard if I had to use the GUI, because it's still easier, I think. So, but it's nice because you don't have to like configure everything. It configures a lot for you. So I'll just cancel out of that because you saw those screenshots. But honestly, I'm just going to show you, you could stop your session here in the GUI. So now you see this little red box, right? That means it's stopped. And then you can delete it from here. You could also say properties to modify it. And that's going to happen regardless. If you set it up with a new session or the wizard, if you do properties, this is where you wind up. So this is ultimately where you wind up, and you have to modify it with this dialog box, right? So that's what you get. And then if you want to delete it from the GUI, you can just say delete. And you don't have to stop it or anything first. I just did that as an example to you. So you can just say, get rid of it. Now it's gone. So what I prefer to do is just use a script to set it up. It just feels a lot easier to me because I just know what I need at this point. When I didn't know what I needed, what I wanted to collect, it was nice to use the GUI to have something. And then you could say, script session as create to a new query window, right? Because that way you can get to the script that's on the screen of whatever you want to collect, because maybe you want different things than I do. That's possible. I think it's very likely you might want different things than I do. So anyway, this whole thing here winds up creating the event, it creates the actual session, the actual extended event session. Then it adds events, the actions, like I mentioned in the slides with the wizard. And now it just does all this via script. I just listed these out so you could see them a little more easily. This event has the same actions. I just wanted you to be able to see that here. Then we set the target, we put in a file. Remember, we're not putting in like C drive or other important drives we don't want to fill up. We set the max size, the max rollover files. We set the startup on, and then we alter it to start it. I guess there's a use case for not starting if you're not ready to have it started, but personally, I just like to start it so that I don't forget. And then there it is. Now it's back over there. It's running. It's got the green arrow. And then let's say now we wanted to query it. So that query I showed you in the slide, this is exactly that. And this will query the file on disk. You'll have maybe noticed that I did not add a filter to it. And so that's because I wanted to make sure that you actually saw something. And then I wanted to show you really quickly that it puts these files on disk. One of these is old. That is not that one. That is from before when I was testing my demo. So it has this one file here. And because it might leave files behind, just so you know, like if you delete something, it could leave a file behind. And you might have old stuff in there because I think it thinks, well, if you're tracking something, you might want to save that even though you didn't want the session in the database engine anymore. Maybe you want the file. So it's there. And like I said, it's going to be 10 files, 10 megs each is going to just put them in this folder for you. So we see a lot of stuff here, right? We're seeing like NT service telemetry. Oh, good. I'm glad that hit because it doesn't always hit. And this is helpful because now you're going to see that there's this stuff happen in the background that you don't know about. So luckily something happened there. But let's say, okay, yeah, I don't want to see everything. I really only want to see a essay. Oops, I forgot. So there's two ways to do this. You could do it through the GUI properties and then go and configure each of your events and clicking around and clicking. But instead, I just know that I want to add a where clause to my events. And I'm going to say, I only want to see if a principal name is essay. So Then I'll just show you in here so that you actually see that it did this thing, it actually updated it. It wasn't like some kind of magic. And so you say configure, and then you see the filter predicate will be on each of these now. It's done that for you with that script. So then we can go back and oops, we can not go, don't go back there. That's not back, that's over. So we can query this session again. Right, but now SA hasn't done anything. I'd have to log in as SA to show you. Let's see if I can remember the SA password. I haven't logged in as SA in a while. Oh, it worked. So let's just say I went and did, so I'm going to say anything. Well, since it's SA, what the heck? Let's just say new database testing SA. Since it's SA, it can do whatever it wants. So then let's do this and let's see. But see, we got all this stuff in here, right? So there's like a ton of stuff it's doing. And this is where I start filtering other stuff out that I don't want to see. Just as an example for you, see all this stuff it's doing in the background. Where is the thing that I actually want to see? Who knows? That's why I start filtering even more stuff. I say, well, I don't know if I want stuff from this or that or the other. So you have to start looking when you audit, what do you want to see? Oh, look at that. See, oh, that's me though. Anyway, it's complicated. Let's put it that way. So it took a while for me to figure this all out. So then let's say I want to alter this and stop it from a script. I can do that like that and then refresh, stop now, right? So you can see that, and then I can drop it from here. So now it's gone and boop, it's gone. And then you come here, but you see the file's still there. It's gone from over here, but the file's still there. So it keeps it there for you in case you need that data for later. So that is my extended events demo. Does anybody have questions about that?
There are no questions in right now. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and post them. You are cracking me up when you say you don't like to work with a GUI. You want to type everything in.
I know, I can't, well, it's because you'll see with SQL, because it gets worse than SQL Server Audit with the GUI, all the clicking and all this stuff, because extended events is actually really simple. So I'm going to go through SQL Server Audit now. And this is why I really hate the GUI, because it gets really messy really fast in the SQL Server Audit. So it is also lightweight and flexible. And it's good for auditing user actions, or if you want to get a database or you want to get the whole server and stuff. But this, I think, is better for more specific auditing use cases, like perms and schema changes, for instance. You want to get all the perms and schema changes for all the databases in the server. This is what you want to use. It uses extended events under the hood. I have read about. There is no evidence to that I can find, that I can't say to you on the server, look, here's an extended event related to this audit. So just know that that's what it does. So that's why it is also lightweight and flexible. And so it was available starting in 2008, but only in enterprise. And then by 2012, Server Audit was in all editions. And that is actually really important, because it may seem like you're limited still quite a bit, but honestly, Server Audit, as we go through, you will see that with the Server Audit, you can audit all the databases also the same way with it. So it was very powerful. That was a nice addition. And in 2016, then all of it's available in all editions, since I know not everybody's running enterprise for everything. So you need two things to make this work. Well, two or three things, depending on what you're trying to do. So you need an audit specification, which is required, because that is where your data is going to live. And then in order for data to go in there, you need either a server audit and or a database audit. So you can have one of each of these in your audit specification. And the server and database audits, they're not dependent on each other. So they just live in that specification together. And the server audit, if you can imagine, it's good for auditing server things, but like I mentioned, it is also good for auditing all databases at the same time. So you don't have to add a database audit to all your databases if you want to audit them the same way at the server audit level, which is really nice. And then database audit is good if you want to audit one database or a subset of activities in one database. And the database audit is good because it can also audit DML, whereas the server audit cannot audit DML. But the thing that's important that you want to keep in mind is you don't want to do all the database auditing at the server level and then also add a database audit with the same audit actions, because you're just going to get a lot of duplicate stuff. We're going to go through that a little bit more here. But so this is how you can create it in the GUI. Different locations based on what you're trying to create here. Just wanted to get you an idea of where you right click to get into your dialog boxes. So the security for audit specification and server audits, that's at the server level. And then each database has its own security, right? And that's where you do the database audits. So when you want to do the audit specification, right, where the data is going to be stored, you right click and you get this dialog box. So I tend to name it audit specification or underscore server name. If you create another one, which you can do, then you can name it something more descriptive. It's kind of up to you how you name it. And then queue delay, I just leave it 1,000. It's the delay in milliseconds, like some wait time. I just never change it. You can do 0, 1,000 or more than 1,000. I just leave it alone. So then what if it can't audit, and if it fails to audit a statement, what is it going to do? I choose continue, because the auditors want to know what happens, but if something gets missed, it's not the end of the world. It just keeps going. I doubt it misses anything, quite frankly, but I don't know for sure because it just continues, right? But your options otherwise are fail operation, which means that if it can't audit it, it's going to fail the operation. So if somebody's trying to create something, delete something, select something, whatever they're trying to do, their statement will fail because it can't be audited. And then shut down the server is just that. Instead of failing operation, it will shut the entire server down because it couldn't audit their statement. So I choose continue because I'm going to have a lot of people screaming at me on a prod server saying, oh, what happened? Like the whole thing failed because it couldn't audit. So I don't need that. Maybe if you had a financial server or legal server and you really, really need to know if somebody's doing something, then I could see that those options would be very valid at that point. So you have audit destinations, right? You have a file, you can put them in the security log or the application log. I choose file, so easy because you just have a file you can query. I could see if you had something like Splunk that can scrape all the application logs and you could store it over there and in that and then easily query it, that could work. We don't have that. Plus the auditors aren't worried that we're gonna like delete the files or delete the stuff out of the audit database or whatever. There's no requirements like that. So it might be good if you have really strict requirements and you're worried somebody's going to delete something, you could put in the security log. There's more restrictions on getting to right to that, but it is an option for you, like for legal or financial reasons. I'm sure if there's a server like that, it would be helpful. So with the file, just like X events, don't put it on the C drive, don't put it on the log or data file drives or system database file. I use E, which is not in my screenshot because I was messing around with Linux at one point, but E drive is good because that's where our apps go. So then like with extended events, same thing. I don't set maximum this, that's, and the other in giant files. They offer you terabyte sized files that I can't imagine you could ever query. You might have to just set up a query and go on vacation for a week, and then you'd be lucky if it returned results. But so that's why I have decided on 4 files, 50 megabytes in size. It sort of was arbitrary, quite frankly, like my X events choosing, but it was just so they're not so gigantic that you can't query them. Even though with the SQL Server Audit, you don't have to parse XML with your query, they still get gigantic and they still get hard to query. And so in this case, since I'm having such small files, I don't say reserve disk space, but I guess you could if you were worried about space on your drive. If you have to worry about 200 megs, then you probably have more problems than auditing those. So I never check that box. So once you create it, it is disabled by default. So you have to right click to enable it. And quite frankly, that drove me crazy one time because I forgot to do this part and set up the rest of what I'm going to show you. And then, oops, I didn't enable it and because it won't collect without that. So once it's enabled, it puts this file on disk. And so that's where your audit data is going to live. But nothing will go there yet because we haven't set up the other bits I'm going to show you, like the server audit, database audit. So it is 0 kilobytes, right? It'll go up to 50 megs. It'll do up to 4 files that size, and then it drops off the file off the back and keeps making note. So like my agenda said I was going to cover, which I'm not, the centralization and the reporting and querying is important because personally, I think you want to centralize your audit data. And so in this case, you need to know how fast these files are going to roll over so you don't miss any data. So before we get into creating the server and database audit specifications, there's some categories we can go over here. So we have server level actions, right? That get things like permission changes and creating databases. It's basically any action that you see that doesn't start with schema or database. Those are going to be your server level actions. And you have database level actions. So these can get things like DML or DDL. So things at database level, right? It's anything that starts with schema or database and those actions. But these actions, the DDL ones, the schema and database stuff can actually be used at the server audit level, which we'll go through here in a little bit. But the DML can only be used in a database audit. You cannot use that at the server level. And then we have audit level actions, so it can audit itself. It's sort of nebulous. It just says audit session changed. It's not very descriptive. You may have to have an audit to audit the audit if you want any more detail than that. And so let's go through some of these actions. So this is a busy slide, a large table here for you to not read because there's too much to read that fast. But these are ones I use at the server level to get permission and schema changes at the server level. And so you can pick and choose. You don't have to use all these, but ultimately, if you want to get all the permission schema changes, that's what you need, all of these. And there is a link on the resources slide that gives you more details on each of these things. And there are some additional ones. I think there's some others I may not use, and it's probably unlikely because I had to use all of them to get everything I needed. There are some that can get things like getting the action, like essay, everything it does. And I think I have a slide for that. So that one is dangerous. That's a dangerous setting to do though in this audit thing, I think. So if you choose these database actions, you can use these database level actions at the server level. Like I said, the server audit, and then it applies to all databases. But if you use these database level actions in a database audit, it's just for that one database. But you don't want to apply in the server audit and the database audit because then you get duplicate data. And the resources slide, there's links for all this stuff too. So then more database level actions, there's so many of them. The only thing to note here is the one thing you cannot do at the server level is the DBCC group audit action there. I tend to just forego that one, so I don't have to set up a database audit just for that. But again, so the rest you can use a server audit or database audit, and they capture those things listed there. So where the database audit I think really shines is capturing DML statements. So things like select, insert, update, delete stuff. And those you can only use in the database audit. You cannot use these at the server level. So now we'll look at how you configure the server audit. And this is under security, top level. You can right click, and then it brings up this dialog box, which the name would not be grayed out, but I think I forgot to take a screenshot when it wasn't. But you would be able to type your name in there, whatever you like to name it. I usually name it that _ server name, something totally up to you, really. Then you have to choose the audit. The specification we set up before, because that's where the data is going to get stored. There's a nice drop down there, so you don't have to remember what it is. It'll just drop down and you can choose it. It can't create without that because it can't put the data anywhere without it. And then we have our audit action types. And so these ones here are, these are going to get all the perms and schema changes at the server level and all the databases the same way, all of them, right? So every database on the server. If you just want to capture server changes here, you would remove all the ones that start with database and schema. Or I don't know, I mean, I guess there's a use case where you could just get all the databases and not the server stuff. I'm not sure I would want to do that, but you could take out all the server ones, are the ones that don't start with database or schema, and then you could just get all your databases. But yeah, so it's very flexible. You could choose just one of these. Maybe you just want to know if a server role member change group happened. You don't have to do all of these, but I just want to get all the perms and schema changes. So it's disabled too by default. So you got to right click it to enable it. Then we come to the database audit. Now you find these in each database. So you have to go there, right click to get that dialog box. Now this is more important that you name it something descriptive that is, excuse me, like it fits the database because it identifies the database because there's system tables that you can use that are in the extras. I don't think I'll have time to go through that, but there are system tables that show you how these are configured. These audits are configured, and if you don't name it explicitly, they'll all be named database audit specification, and you literally there's no way to tie them back to a database. I can't find one anyway. I've tried. So then also you need to associate with your audit that you created, right? The specification, because it's going to store the data there. And then these actions that I selected will get schema and firms changes plus DBCC group. If you're doing this at the server level already, minus the DBCC thing, because you can't do that server level, then you don't want to set this up here. So this is where, though, I think the database audit shines, because you can do the DML statements that happen. So like insert on an object testing table where public means you didn't log into public. It just means everybody that hit this table, whoever's hitting this table, inserting to it, we're going to get that. And then for other cases, it's delete on a schema, then the schema is the object name, and you could say auditing. So only the auditing user. Let's say you wanted to get multiple users that are deleting on that schema. You have to add another line that says delete schema DBO and then put that principal's name. You can't do like auditing, comma, something else user. Each user has to have their own line. And then you can update on a database, auditing database, public, everybody who's updating. And I put in red bold there too, because those can get big fast. And we're going to talk about my horror story soon, because unlike extended events where you just stop it, this SQL Server audit gets persnickety about that kind of thing. When it's auditing, it says I'm busy auditing, and that can be tricky. So we'll talk about that in a sec. Same thing here, you have to enable it because it's disabled by default. So you just have to enable it. If you try to add, say you have a database audit or a server audit, you want to add another one, you can't add it to the same audit specification because there's already one in there. So whatever you have in your audit specification, you can have one of each server and database audit. So if you want another one, you're going to have to add another audit specification. So here, there's some scenarios that I won't go through in great detail, but the point is that you can have multiple audit specifications with a server and or a database audit in them to get maybe perms and schema changes at the server and database level. Maybe you want to get everything SA does in another one. Maybe somebody's changing a table. Developers come to me sometimes and say, I don't know who's using this table. So I could do that on one table. And that's really nice with audit. It's very nice. It's very easy to do that. Extended events is harder to do that. And here, you could do another audit. I wouldn't do all of these at the same time. I think the first and the fourth, definitely I wouldn't do at the same time, but these are just to show you that you could do multiples of them at the same time. So you're not limited. If it says, oh, error, you can't, then you can do different audit scenarios here. So you can use the GUI to actually view the audit logs. This is kind of more of a quick look-see kind of thing, because it'll pull up a dialog box. It's not exactly user-friendly to look through in detail what's happened here, but it's there. Just like extended events, you might see nothing because you didn't audit anything that you want. Nothing's audited, that nothing happened that was audited, or you see tons of stuff and you like, wow, that's a lot of stuff in the background. And we're going to go through filtering in a second here, because you can filter these as well. But first, I want to tell you about the columns available in the audit, because that's important for when you want to get your results out from it, or you want to filter, because this is the columns you would use. The thing to note is that the differences, some 2017 added some nice things like client IP and application name, and then 2019 added host name. And that's really helpful, because before 2017, Yeah, good luck. If people don't know where that statement's coming from and you just know it's like, yeah, it's that person doing that statement on this thing. And yeah, that's why I'll show you a comparison at the end of when I use extended events versus SQL Audit. But these here are not all the columns either. These are just the ones I find most useful. In the demo, I'll show you there are a lot more columns that seem not terribly useful to me. So you can filter. You can do this in the GUI. You could have done this when you set it up. I just didn't want to add a lot of busyness to the slide at the beginning when we're setting it up. So you can filter on any column that's in that list, or even more that I don't have in that list that's in the audit file itself. So you could filter things out. Like I usually filter out things like monitoring tool. We have Idera. You maybe filter out server name $ accounts, because that's the stuff behind the scenes SQL Server is doing a lot. And it can fill up your auditing files really fast. Here's where you could say, I just want to see the stuff SA does. This is where you could do this. It's like a where statement. Basically, it's a where clause without the where keyword. That's the thing. You can't put where in here or error out. So that's filtering. So there are two ways to delete the audit. You can do it with a GUI or a script. And here, it's kind of nice when you decide you want to delete it through the GUI, because you can check that box to say disable. It's highlighted by the red box there, because you have to stop it to delete it. And you can delete it with a script too, but you got to stop it. In the next page, I'll show you how you can disable, you can stop the audit, you can disable the audit through a script too. So the one thing to note is when you delete this audit specification, it will leave the files on disk. There's old stuff in there, just like the extended event, it leaves the files there just in case you need them. And then the other thing is, because we have multiple pieces here, right? If you delete an audit specification and you put it back with the same name, it is no longer associated to your server or database audits, because it's a GUID in the background. You could script it out and get that GUID and recreate it. I think that would probably work. I haven't tried that, but I got into a bad situation where I was like, why is this not collecting anything? Everything's set up, but it's because my server audit was disassociated from my audit specification because I deleted it and recreated it with the same name. So you got to go back in and fix that. So it's just a little gotcha, just in case you start deleting things, that you don't delete everything and then you got to reassociate. So you can stop it by right clicking and say disable, or you can use those scripts. They're a little different flavor based on which one you want to disable. The thing is, this is when my horror story happened, because I had, for PCI compliance, I had to do certain auditing that I wouldn't necessarily recommend otherwise, but I tried to disable it so I could modify it, and then things got crazy and nothing was happening. And then I had to bounce the service and I caused a production outage. I mean, technically that shouldn't happen though. It should give you this lock request timeout period exceeded error, because audits say I'm busy, go away. It's unlike extended events. The audit is no, I'm busy. Like I got to keep auditing this. So you're telling me to audit, it's different. It's very serious about its auditing. It's not just, oh, I'm not just collecting random stuff here. So that's the thing. So it's not long running statements that are so much the problem as like a lot of statements hitting it. And that's what my server was like. It was a lot of statements. People were legitimately decrypting credit cards as part of customer service at the company, but I had to catch every single select statement. So that was kind of problematic. And just made it hard to stop. So when you want to modify it, again, you have to disable it. And so you can do that through properties, but you don't have to modify. You can do that and bring up dialog box, or you can modify it with a script. But again, you have to stop it. And the only thing you cannot modify is the name of the audit. So you have to delete it and recreate it if you wanted to do that. Okay, I'm going to stop for a sec because I need a little drink. And then basically the overview is you need an audit specification, and then you need either a server and or database audit to actually put something in there. So I'm going to see if there's any questions.
We do have some questions, but while you drink, I want to point out, when I saw that terabyte option, I just kind of went into panic mode.
Like, I know, it's crazy. It's like, what? Yeah.
Okay, so we have some questions from Cecil. For DML changes, does it matter if you use audit or extended events?
Well, it depends on what you want to accomplish. That's the thing. If you want to see specific selects on some object, That is very difficult to accomplish with extended events. But like if you said, I want to see selects on this table in this database, that's very easy to do with SQL Server Audit. If you want to see all the selects across, well, I don't know, that is a bad example. Don't say that. I don't want to say that. If you want to see all the selects across all the tables, that's a difficult one even still. But I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I just forget I said that. But yeah, so you would have to use SQL Server Audit, I think, if you want to see like a specific some table or even like a database selects or something, because it's not easy in extended events to do that.
Okay. And he also asked, can you audit a server role or roles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. That's all at the server level audit. There's some actions in there that you can audit that stuff.
And I'm going, I had another question too from me, and I'm going to be showing my hand that I'm citizen developer, including in the SQL Server world. But I saw that you had that server level action to track when a user changes their password, which kind of got me excited and interesting. So you could, so my question is, can you, that could be set up correct as a separate audit by itself? Is that,
Yeah.
That's part one? And then how would you, because then I start thinking about things like Power Automate, like how would we disseminate the information to the appropriate people that passwords are changing more than they should be, or that changing when we don't expect it?
Right, right. Yeah, so you could separate that out into its own audit if you want to keep that as a separate action in there. And then if you want to, so I have another presentation that I give that my agenda was from that includes all the centralization and reporting pieces of that. Because what I do with this is I take all of this and I centralize it into a database. And then daily I send an email to me. So me and my team get this email showing the last day of stuff and a weekly ticket that has an HTML file with the perms and schema changes, but you could certainly modify that to be, if it's just that audit with them changing their password, you could certainly modify that to collect that information centrally and then send an email to the team or maybe a ticket or whatever you'd want it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
There are no other questions right now, so don't forget everyone to type your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay,
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I love having questions. I learned so much from the questions. They sometimes, or the thinking about the questions. I love it.
Yep.
So,
and I did share your blog and your GitHub in the chat as well.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, okay, I don't like I said with X events, I don't like using the GUI if I can avoid it, especially as I have multiple servers and it gets boring to click and right click. And then with the audit, I'll tell you, you can set up a server audit and you can pick the same action twice and click OK, and then it just saves one of them for you, or you miss one. You don't know. It's a lot easier. The drop down's messy in there in the audit. It's so messy to go through. You'll see in the demo. So I personally think it's easier to script period, but when you want to put in a multiple servers, it's even easier to script it. And actually, I did a presentation earlier today, which reminded me, I have scripts that specifically go through with dynamic SQL that you can run against a registered server list to add them to all your servers. I forgot to add to my GitHub, so I'm going to do that. But this here, you see, creating this audit, it's very in alignment with the dialog box. It's very straightforward here. It's, you know, you're naming it to a file, you're doing all the same settings. So it's really not like a confusing script. And at the end, you just alter it and set it on. You don't have to alter it and set it on, but I think personally you want to, because you don't want to forget to, like I did before. So then you actually does things. And then you can create the server audit with a script. It's, again, very much in alignment with the dialog box. So you name it, you associate it to the audit, and then you add these things. So if you want to take one out or you want to put one in, it's so much easier. You can see what's already there. Unfortunately, it doesn't script it out in alphabetical order, but that would be nice. But still, it's so much easier because it's just, it's so much easier. This here is going to get the perms and schema changes for the server level and all the databases the same way. So that's what that script would do. Then you have your database audit. So it's same, like in alignment with the dialog box, you got your actions, all of these, this here would get all the, for just this one database, right? It would get the perms and schema changes and DBCC, which I told you I forego on database. I'm not too worried about that. So, but again, you don't want to use this if you've already done what I just showed you on the previous slide, because that's going to get all of this stuff for you and the server level and all the databases. So you don't want to duplicate. You're just duplicating the auditing is the thing. It's not like a huge harm there, but it's just extra stuff you don't want to weed through. More, it's just, you don't want to do that. So then you can filter. So you have now it's the official where clause with the where keyword, as opposed to the GUI where you don't use the where keyword. And those columns I mentioned, that's what you're filtering on. Like you don't want to see the monitoring account. I don't want to see the built-in servers again. These things, you can include things, exclude things. So that's what you can do with the filtering. So if you want to see the querying via the GUI, which I think I already covered, so I don't think we need to do that again, but you can do that in the GUI, or like I've said, script. And this script is way easier than X events. It's so nice because you just call a function and then you list the columns as if you're just querying a table. So much nicer than having to parse XML. And in this case, I joined a system table, the audit action table, because sometimes stuff comes through the audit and you're like, why did I get that? Because that doesn't seem like something I was wanting to audit. But the thing is that SQL Server will do things behind the scenes to support a query that somebody else, some user is running. So another thing to note here is that it's in UTC time. So that's why I have that sysdate time offset function in there, because one time I was thinking, why is all this stuff in such a weird time? And I was trying to filter it by get this for the last hour and it wasn't working. Normally I do, it depends on how often you want to collect it, how much you want to say get at date at hour minus 24 here. But I was doing an hour and I couldn't see anything because nothing happened in the last hour. So anyway, this just helps you centralize, because that's what I do with all this data is I centralize it. And here is a SQL Server Auditing equivalent of what I showed you with extended events. So I would create another audit to keep it separate from my schema and perms auditing. And I'd say just SA. And sometimes I filter out other things like schemas and things I don't want to see, like sys or whatever. If it's doing something in the background, I'll sometimes filter more stuff. So that gives you an example of that there on the left. And then on the right, those bold red ones, I put them there in bold red because these are the ones where if you have a really active user, then you could have a very busy audit that makes it hard to stop. Or maybe it gets so big and it's hard to keep up with. So I'm just saying this is the X events equivalent of that. I don't use this because my server in question with the SA issue I mentioned is on SQL Server 2014. So I'm not getting those columns I need, like client IP or the client application, because I need my users to know, hey, this is where it's coming from, because they might not know. And then I can't even tell them. So that is why in this case, you could use this, especially around 2019, it would be fine. The only problem is if you're auditing so much, it's hard to stop it. So that's that's kind of why when I go through some slides toward the end, I will explain more about why I use which things. So script summary, right? You can do everything in the GUI that you do in the GUI, you can do with scripts. And so I just think it's easier to create on multiple servers. It's easier to query and centralize with scripts. And I just think it makes life so much easier. So I'm going to go to the demo for this, but first I'll wait for a sec if anybody has questions.
Yep, we have quite a few now.
Okay.
Have you, and I'm so glad this question was asked because I had this question on a version of this on mine, but have you done much analysis or querying of the collected data?
Yeah, well, yes. I don't know about analysis, but we query on it regularly. Actually, I have centralized it all. I have another presentation on this with link servers and agent jobs and database mail and stuff where I get it all collected together in a central server. And then daily, I send an email to the team, an HTML formatted email from the agent. So I catch any red flags before the weekly report that goes to the auditors in a ticket. And that's a PowerShell HTML file. So that's the main thing. 1 week, I didn't have any handling in my PowerShell for if there were no auditing records, send a file to the ticketing system anyway. So 1 week we didn't get a ticket. Why? Because nobody changed anything during that week, which was very surprising. So, I mean, as far as analysis goes, it was more just reporting, I think, is what I do, is reporting more than sometimes analysis. I guess you could call it when I'm analyzing if a server is like, is anybody using this or what's going on? We want to get rid of something. I might do that more analysis type stuff, but yeah.
The next question, this is from Bruce. He said he tried some and it appears the doc is incomplete on some of the aspects, especially FN get audit file and the column it returns. So I think he's talking maybe about reporting still or doing the analysis.
Well, yeah, so I don't know, the documentation may be lacking, but I'll show you in the demo how you can get all the columns. You can get all the columns from the query and then you can see them all yourself. I mean, I don't know what I haven't used the documentation in forever, so I don't know what it looks like, but at least you can run the query yourself to see what it does. It's kind of basic. It just calls the file and then you can put in the columns you want from it. It's kind of nice, actually.
Yeah, and he actually said that he's running into some confusion on audit events that use the sequence number.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Okay.
Okay, you want to think on that one a bit, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that, well, I'm not really sure exactly what it means. Maybe we'll get some clarification. Let me do the demo and then maybe he types some more in the chat if the demo doesn't cover that.
There you go, Bruce. What is the name of your session that centralizes and reports on the data?
Okay, that is how to audit SQL Server for free.
Okay, cool. So there you go, Cecil, on that one. And then one last question for SQL Server Audit. How do you upload events incrementally or only events from the previous upload?
So what I do is I have an agent job on each of the audited servers that uses a link server that sends them to the central server. It reads the files on disk and it just goes and says, I just want to get the last hour. And so it pulls from the files. The files might have more than an hour, but the job only gets the last hour. Well, excuse me, no, it's every 4 hours, I believe, is what I did, because how many perms and schema changes are happening, within an hour. So, and then I send them via the job. So that's kind of how I handle it, is just by saying, just get the last X time and then send it to the central server.
Okay, great. That wraps up the questions for right now.
Okay, yay. Okay, so my next demo. This is the first time I've done 2 demos in one presentation. Okay, so again, I have this message at the top. This is in my GitHub already with the how to audit SQL Server for free. So I've gone through this one before. These will be up in my GitHub at the end of this. I'll put them up as part of this presentation from GroupBy. So you'll have this and the X events stuff as well. So I just didn't want you to run this whole thing just like, bam, just go do that. No, because I kind of wanted you to step through this. And then let's see what I've got going on here, because I feel like maybe I didn't clean everything up, or maybe I just didn't refresh. I did a demo earlier today and I swear I cleaned everything up, but I guess I didn't. Excuse me for a sec, because invariably I have to clean some more stuff. There's actually a script at the bottom of this for when you're done, which reminds me that there is a script down there so you can clean up after yourself when you're done. But apparently I'm opposed to using my own script to clean up. So let's set up an audit though. So we're going to set up an audit special. Remember, you can name this what you want. You can name it something more specific. I sometimes have a couple of these, but usually I only have the one main one that I'm getting perm schema changes for. So I just name it something generic. Q delay, I leave alone. I leave it on continue because I don't want things to fail. I do file. I don't do those other options. I just do file. It's easier. Put it in a folder on my E drive, remember, because we don't want to do it in some other drive that could fill up and we have problems. I just settled on 4 and 50. It's like, yep. So I just left it alone. And then I don't reserve disk space because it's so small. So that's the general setup. That is what's in the slide there for you too. So that's the standard. So for me, the standard setup, and it did a little red X, right? So it's disabled. You got to enable it. There is no option as part of the GUI to just enable it as part of it, like X events. So you got to do that. You got to remember to do that, or nothing collects. So nothing is going to collect right now because there's no server or database audit. Here's my audit specification file. It puts it there because it's enabled and it's ready to go. Nothing's going to go there, like I said, yet, but it'll put up to 4 files of 50 megs each, right? Because that's what I said. And then, it drops off the back. So that's why when I'm centralizing, I need to know how fast it fills up. And so I can make sure to get that stuff. So we have the server audit, right? So that's that same area there. So I just named something generic usually. And here's that little drop down I mentioned. You got to associate it. You can't create it without that because that's where the data is going to live. And then here, the only thing you need to choose in this case is I'm going to choose the server object change group. Half the time I pick the wrong one and then my demo blows up. Okay, server, see this one I'm talking about. You got to go in here. What all of these things do you want? See, there are more things. I said that in my slide and then I thought, is there more stuff? There's more stuff. And I don't want all this stuff. You might want some of the stuff. I mean, you should go through that link on the resources slide because there's more stuff in here. I don't want all this stuff. But this is why it's so hard to do this with a GUI, because then you got to be clicking around and all that. You don't have to fill out the rest because it's not applicable. It's above the object level. So it creates disabled, right? So nothing's going to collect because it's not. So I enabled it. Now we're going to go back to using scripts because I like my scripts. So I'm going to create a database. It's going to go there. You're going to see it's there. And then the thing is, we're going to use the GUI for once, just so you can see how it works. You do the audit specification, right? That's where the data is stored. That specification is where you view the audit logs. And then you can see only this one thing. You don't see that I created a database because I don't have the right audit action there for that. But you do see audit session change. And that's what I talk about. When audit session change, it's a very nebulous auditing. It's not very descriptive. That's as descriptive as it gets. And so if you want more auditing of your audits, you may have to create another audit that audits those itself. So anyway, that's the dialog box. I will close that for now. But since I know, because I've gone through this many times, that what we need is actually to alter the audit to set it off, because remember, we have to disable it to modify it. And then we add this other action, this audit action, then we re-enable it. So then that will show up in here. I'll show you this one time. This now is in there, right? So we've added that database change group. So we are going to drop and recreate this just so we can see it in there. But first, before we look, I'm going to show you that's a select star from the function that gets all the columns. I don't expect you to read this fast and see all this stuff. But you see, these are all the columns that are in there. There are a lot of them. Like I said, I just show you the ones that I find most useful. You can do this on your own testing to see if there is something in there that you'd like to use. But this here is what I actually use. And then we can see, there it is. We dropped a database and we created a database. I am just going to move this query over here because mainly I don't want to scroll back up and down every time I do something. So I'm gonna, excuse me. My God, my voice is going. I've done like 3 presentations in the last day and practiced 2 other ones. So my voice is like, no. So we're going to create a login here, but we're going to go back to our query for our audit. We're not going to see that there. We're not going to see that create because I know we don't have the server principal change group. So we're going to add that. And then this here, this is always interesting to me. I keep forgetting to research this, but check this out. Every time I try to drop and create at the same time, it can't do that. It can't drop it and create at the same time. I got to remember to look into that, but I always forget. So I got to drop it. I got to create it. So if somebody knows that, and they put it in the chat, because I'm curious if somebody knows what's the deal. So then we go back over here and we see that drop login, create login, because we added that new audit action. So then here, now I want to associate a user and give it some role perms in that database. But if I do that now and I actually want to see in the audit, I'm not going to see it there, right? Because I don't have these additional actions. So the actions are just building on themselves. So I'm just going to drop that user and recreate and regrant the perms just so we can see it over here now, because we added the right actions to get that. So you could use one of these or all of these. You could do everything in here. It's very nuanced. So we could say, I want to create a table, but I really want to see it in the audit, but you're not going to see it there because you don't have the schema object change group. So you got to add that. And then we're gonna drop and recreate this table, and then we're gonna look at our audit again. And now we see that. So it's just showing you how it's you can do a lot of nuances if you want to just get certain things or not. This is really where the SQL Server Audit shines. And this is not easy to do with X events. It is not easy at all to try to pick out something you want to audit specifically like this. This is definitely where you want to use the database SQL Server Audit. So now I wouldn't normally do this. I wouldn't grant alter to an object to a specific user. I would use some other like a group or a role or something, but I wanted you to see that does not show up in our audit because we don't have the schema object permission change group. And so then, oh, because I didn't run it again. Hello, I have to like actually do something so that you know you have to do something before it gets audited. Okay, so there it is. I granted it's in there now. So then let's say I want to insert to a table. I want to get that. That's not going to happen here. You can't even do that in a server audit. So we don't even have a database audit. And this is where I go ahead and say, I'm gonna put in a separate specification. I don't want that mixed up with my report to the auditors that, you know, so I go ahead and create another server audit, a server audit specification. If I can refresh, there we go. So now it's there, it's ready. There's a separate file, or there should be a separate file depending on where I put it. Oh yes, because I'm even that clever that I put it in a subfolder so that it's not together. So there it is, okay. Then I create a database audit that's just going to get insert on that object by anybody, right? Public. So what I'm going to do again is insert, and then we're going to look. It's not there, but that's only because I have to go into my subfolder, right? So now it's there. So I like to keep that stuff totally separate. So I'm not going to log in as a testing user because that's going to take too much time and I'm running out of time. But normally I don't do that anyway. So you're not missing out because I always forget the testing password. So then I wanted to show you here just quickly, like in this case, I was futzing around with Linux. So that's why that's the account, but I want to filter because I don't want to see that service account coming through. And then you're going to see that in here in the filters, it's added it nowhere, right? There's nowhere there. You don't use, oops, you don't use the where in there, but you do over here in this. So then you can modify and say this all in there. I want to get to the juicy stuff of comparing this X events to SQL Server because that's my favorite part. But this is all in a script in my GitHub already. So you can disable and delete the audits out. This script has a whole way to clean all your stuff up behind it too after you do a demo for your own demo, your own test, I should say. So I will pop out of this now and then pause for a second to see if anybody has any questions about the demo.
I don't see any questions yet, but I do want to point out that Cecil responded to your question about ideas of what to try, and he suggested try running the go statement in between your commands.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cecil.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you, Cecil. That's good because I'm always so busy doing a demo and then I forget later. Okay, yeah, thank you. Oh, yeah, go.
And then, okay, so Bruce has a continuing question to drop it, the drop login, create login. Do you have any server triggers?
No, I don't have any server triggers. No. I mean, I guess you could do something like I've used them at old job where I didn't want people doing things like creating logins and things. And then we had a trigger that said, nope, can't do that. But I don't do that now.
Okay, great. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, Josephine.
Okay. So I'm down in the wire here. So I think that there's pros and cons of both of these things. They're both lovely in their own ways and they're horrible in other ways. But so I think with extended events, it's nice you got those templates to get started with. And if you've used Profiler, it's going to feel familiar. You can view events in the GUI, which I don't really like that much, but it's kind of nice if you just want to kind of take a peek. You can just set off an extended event right down below the agent. There's an option for that too, where you just need a quick look, see of what's going on. That's another option. Plus you can use this for other things besides audit, like monitoring and stuff like that. But you have to know how to query XML. So that's kind of a pain. That's very painful at first. And then SQL Server Audit, again, you can view in the GUI, not my favorite way, but you can. The nice thing is you don't have to know XML to query the events out of the file. And the not really nice thing about the audit is it's much easier. It's more confusing to set it up for sure, but it is easier to get some specific auditable actions out of the audit. But there aren't any templates to guide you. So it's a little bit steeper learning curve there. So here's some quick comparisons tables. I can't imagine you'll read all of this in the time that I'm going to just highlight the differences. So basically the big thing is SQL Server Audit. You cannot modify it while it's running. And depending on how much you're auditing and trying to disable it, it could be a problem for you. So that's something to keep in mind. There's different locations you can save these each to. I won't go through all those details there, but there are there. And then, okay, you don't have to parse XML with SQL Server Audit, which is really nice. I like that. But in SQL Server Audit, you don't have that host info in the app, like the application it come from until 2017 and later. So that's painful. And then Extended Events has the templates, so that's nice. And then Extended Events only has that one object that you have to keep track of. And SQL Server Audit has those 2 or 3, and that's definitely more complex. So, and then also, like I mentioned before, the Extended Events has that ability to get other metrics like wait stats or connection tracking stuff that SQL Server Audit doesn't do that stuff. So here's my specific use cases. So when I'm deciding how to use these things, if I want to audit everything a user does, I use Extended Events mostly because I have older servers too. And I'm not getting that IP and app information that I need from the audit. If I was in a more current, like if I was in 2017 and on, which I'm not, and now we're going to the cloud, so it's a whole nother story. Maybe I would use SQL Server Audit there, but maybe not. So if I want to audit all the perms and schema changes, I'm definitely using SQL Server Audit for that. If I want to know who's changing a specific table or tables, or if they're executing a certain procedure or something like that, I'm definitely using SQL Server Audit. But if I want to audit everything happening in a specific database, still be careful with that because you get so much data, you don't know what to do with it. I would use Extended Events. So that's just kind of where I'm at on what I would use it for. Again, I have my warning again, just be careful. I don't think it's likely you could freeze up a production server just from running this stuff. Like if you're using Extended Events or you're using a SQL Server Audit, the sheer fact of auditing everything in sight isn't what's going to cause problems for you. It's that if you try to stop your audit, it could cause problems. It could not be able to stop. Or you just get so much data with either of these techniques I showed you that you might as well just audit nothing because you haven't gained anything because you have so much audit data. So here's the resources slide I mentioned. And so there's more information on all of this stuff really on these links. And then, okay, we got to the end and I think I'm on time. So thank you for attending. I am so grateful to GroupBy for putting this on. And again, I want to thank all the sponsors because without this, then we can't do this. And thank you, Belinda, for moderating. And I'm very appreciative of your help. And there's my contact info in case you all want to hit me up later.
This was fascinating, Josephine. I know
Really?
everyone was excited. There's some thank yous. There's Cecil included me too, but it's all Josephine. But you rock. Awesome job. Thanks. And a lot to soak in. Thank you. So you hit a home run. So
yeah,
well done.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. I was trying to watch both at once there, but I definitely was loving everything I was picking up on this side. I'm looking forward to editing those recordings so I can really dive in and see.
She gave me a heart attack a couple times. She's putting up a screen where you could create a log that is in terabytes, and it was freaking me out.
Oh my goodness gracious! Honestly, I love Josephine's demos always. It's always so fun. And I can't believe that you're working on 5 sessions right now. That's nuts. So how are you feeling with that? Are you
Well, it was a little bit overkill because today I had already signed up months ago to do DBA fundamentals group, not knowing that GroupBy would be today. And so then I'm scrambling and I had to submit my past summit video yesterday. And then I forgot to share my screen when I started recording. So I talked an entire hour without my screen.
No.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah, so
I mean, it's good though. At least, you know, you got all the nerves out, right? So it's like, okay, now I can do this. I wonder if they could just like record your screen and you just sync it up. That'd be so funny. But this was awesome. You're awesome. This was great all around.
I always mess up on GroupBy because the last time I messed up my demo really badly was at GroupBy in the spring. And this time I had slides in here that weren't even for this presentation. It's like something, GroupBy really challenges me. I love this conference, so it's great. Thank you so much.
Well, we love you being here too. And I remember the last presentation we did too, the live troubleshooting. That was like one of the coolest things ever. I loved that. It was like I was like in awe how cool you kept it, like fix it so quick. I'm like, that is a demo. That is a demo you want to see, you know, not the sterile, like I love to see that in real time. I don't love doing that in real time, but I love seeing others do it. So it was so awesome.
Exactly. I'm human, as it turns out. I was like, I thought I was a perfect being, but I'm human. So you see it live.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm going to let Andy get on in here and we'll wrap up with our last session. But thank you so much again. Hopefully we can hang out a little bit. If you want to stay for the next session, if you got to go, you got 5 million other sessions going on. Totally understand. But thank you again. And
thank you.
Excited for this last session. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Hey, all right, my turn now.
You're